Hey everybody, it's Sean here with Sweatpants BI. I see a ton of Power BI reports every single day, thanks to my good friend LinkedIn, mostly from people that are, very early in their Power BI career. For whatever reason, I don't see too many people who are very established Power BI builders, posting their work on a regular basis. Most of the stuff that I see being posted on LinkedIn is from people who are newer to Power BI or who are fresh out of uni. I'm an American. I'm not sure if I can get away with saying uni. I'm not sure if I'm credible. Usually we call it college or university, but I'm going to say uni because I know a lot of my people watching my channel are from overseas. But anyway, I do see a lot of people who are definitely in the early stages of their Power BI career, sort of posting their work on LinkedIn, trying to get feedback, trying to showcase their capabilities so that they can land their first business intelligence jobs. Because of this, I see a lot of, really brilliant young people, and not just young people too, also people that are, older than myself or who are maybe considering changing careers, or just people who have suddenly decided to dip their toes into the BI waters as part of their roles in finance or accounting or sales or marketing or something else that has a data component to it. And they're just learning Power BI and they want to learn from other people or share or network and just demonstrate their newfound capabilities in Power BI. Regardless of what kind of person you are in your business intelligence career, I just wanted to say that, as somebody who's been building literally hundreds, if not, over 1,000, I hesitate to say thousands, but I feel like I've definitely built over 1,000 Power BI tools. I just wanted to share some of the most common Power BI mistakes that I see every single day, mostly on LinkedIn, but, sometimes in other places. So that, hopefully if you're someone who is just trying to get some feedback or trying to, sort of grow as a developer or build more attractive tools or build more impactful tools for different enterprises, hopefully these are things that are going to help you on your journey and make you a better Power BI developer, because I know it's hard out there. I sucked, big at building Power BI tools. When I was just starting to build, it took me dozens of Power BI tools before I started to feel more comfortable, and probably over 100 before I really felt more comfortable sort of bringing my own aesthetic and, figuring out the things in my designs that really worked for me and the people that were consuming my reports. I will say that early on, as someone who came from, we'll call it more of an artistic background than necessarily a data background, when I started sort of fancying up my reports, one of the big mistakes that I did was thinking that my aesthetics and cosmetics were going to make my reports more impactful and more engaging for my audiences. It took a long time of feedback and maturity to understand that there's a difference between just building attractive reports and also building, reports that communicate information very well. So in this video, I just wanted to focus on 8 topics that you might want to keep in mind to improve your own Power BI game and hopefully make you a better developer. The first mistake that I see is one that happens all the time, and like I said, this really is something that only improves with lots and lots of practice and feedback, and the sort of maturity that only comes with building a ton of reports. And that is that the Power BI report lacks style. To put it in a very friendly manner, this is, let's just be more blunt and say I see lots of absolutely hideous Power BI reports. That there's not a lot of redeeming qualities when it comes to, being an attractive report that makes me excited to jump in and try to understand more about the information that's being communicated. And I've talked about this in some of my other videos, but one of the primary things that immediately makes reports ugly is a poor understanding of color theory and color management. So to sort of be a broken record and sort of harken back to a color management video that I did not too long ago, just want to go ahead and re-emphasize some of those points. If your Power BI reports are ugly and maybe your friends and colleagues are too afraid or polite to tell you that your reports are ugly, but if you suspect they're ugly, focus on your color. One of the most important tips that I can give you is to try to, in most circumstances, I'm going to say 99% of circumstances, see if you can get away with only using 2 or 3 colors in your Power BI report without a loss of information. Most of the times when I see people presenting Power BI reports and data visuals, they're using color to present information that could be presented just as well without any color whatsoever. If it were a completely gray bar chart, you could still read that visual through proper data labeling, through proper axes, and other data visualization manipulation techniques. Try to use only 2 or 3 colors, and if you're confused or if you're struggling with which 2 or 3 colors to use, I would say read any of the number of wonderful articles that are out there online, sort of explaining how color theory and color wheels work in designing color palettes or in designing color usage guidelines for web design. I feel like not enough people, when they're building their first Power BI tools, really understand that there is a lot to be learned from good web design techniques for Power BI. Most of us are not building Power BI tools to have those tools printed out as pages or saved as PDFs to send to people. Most of us are building Power BI tools that are going to be published on the Power BI website for different people from our enterprise to log into and use to consume information. So we are effectively building small websites or web tools that create environments for our users to go and explore insights and understand data. So research what are good web design techniques and things that you can sort of incorporate into your design to make those reports more aesthetically pleasing and also more impactful for people around your company. The next thing that I would highly encourage you to do before you go publishing your work on something like LinkedIn, or before you include a Power BI report or something that you built in your Power BI portfolio, is to just give it that extra bit of polish. This can go back to what I just said a moment ago, and that could be reviewing all of your data visuals to make sure that you're not using color unnecessarily, or to make sure that, if you did take out color from a data visual or different areas of your report, that you wouldn't lose any information. Obviously, I'm also talking about going through your report with a fine-tooth comb and making sure that there are no typos, that all of your grammar reads very professionally, and that you're, throughout your report, that you're focused on communicating information and insights, that you're not just throwing bar charts or, I would say, aspects of your data that are super obvious onto the page. At the end of the day, for a lot of people who are new to data visualization and new to Power BI development, one of the things that frustrates me is that there's not a lot of thought or care behind what the individual is visualizing. They're just clicking on different things from the data, putting bar charts onto the page, and there's not really a whole lot that is interesting, or as the audience for that report, I'm not seeing a whole lot of things that I think, are really there to captivate me and make me care about that data. Because another thing that I see in a lot of Power BI reports from newcomers or people who are just sort of learning the craft is that their Power BI report just has no focus. I can tell basically how much experience you have with Power BI in a lot of instances just by seeing how you present and how you lay your data visuals on the page. At the end of the day, one of the most challenging things for people who are coming to Power BI to understand is that it's not just about building bar charts, building line charts, and sort of throwing more descriptive information onto the Power BI report page. You're also trying to find a narrative or find things that are interesting or trends in the data that are going to, sort of give users an idea of what they should maybe do about or with the insights that you're showing them. A lot of the times this can be as simple as just showing them, which product in your data set had the most revenue or the least revenue, or maybe the department within your company that had the lowest employee retention, or that had the biggest change in employee retention over year. Maybe you're really trying to sort of highlight or make the case that your company has a retention problem, or that maybe one or a handful of departments in your company might suddenly be seeing an exodus of employees that was not present in other years. At the end of the day, a lot of Power BI reports are sort of intended to let other people in your company know that something has changed or could be starting to change, or that something good or positive might be happening in one area of the company and something negative might be happening in other areas of the company. Power BI reports are also sort of intended to help us understand as a company that we are achieving or underachieving towards a particular target or goal, and also helps us understand that given sort of baseline information in the past about what we would expect, helps us sort of analyze anomalies or outliers so that we can sort of dig into why maybe certain things within our data are not behaving the way that we might expect based on, the sort of historical data that we use. But, at the end of the day, what you might be hearing right now is that there are all kinds of different stories and narratives that are possible to find in almost any data set, no matter how large. But it falls on you to sort of identify what might be interesting. As BI people, we don't get to sort of be agnostic. We don't get to sort of be unprejudiced in our presentation of data. I think that one problem that I see in a lot of new BI developers is sort of the timidity or sort of reluctance to sort of find something and really focus on it and tell a compelling story. You will miss the mark sometimes, and that's totally fine. But when you don't introduce a little bit of your own bias, especially into Power BI reports where you're just trying to sort of flex your growth and your learning, then you're ultimately building a Power BI report that has no focus and doesn't tell anyone anything. It's, when you are building a Power BI report for your company or for a professional audience, you can, highlight things that you find interesting, and your audience or your stakeholders can tell you that that's not really interesting or that was expected, and you can take it out. Or something that happens to me all the time when I'm building Power BI reports is that I surface something and then my stakeholders take that and they run with it. And then they ask for some additional views or data sets or elements to sort of flesh out the story that you kind of started. So I want to be very, very clear that if you're building a Power BI report, especially for recreational purposes or for your portfolio, feel free to take a side. Find something that you think is interesting and really double down on sort of telling that story. So this is all just another way of saying that the Power BI report that you're building, if it just shows visuals instead of presenting data and communicating insights, that's a huge problem. And here, I want to quickly just reach down here and grab an excellent book that I highly recommend, and that is Data Visualization by Andy Kirk. And I want to just read an excerpt here about what data visualization is, because if you're building Power BI reports, you work in data visualization. Andy Kirk defines data visualization as the visual representation and presentation of data to facilitate understanding. And the reason that I'm pointing at you, the reader, or you, the viewer of this video, is because I see a lot of people that are building Power BI reports that focus on the visual representation piece and they focus on the data piece, but they don't focus on the presentation piece and the understanding piece. At the end of the day, don't think that that it's not important to build attractive Power BI reports, and that it's not important to make very useful usage or very deliberate and careful usage of something like text and description and sentence structure and narrative in the context of your Power BI reports. Because if you are building Power BI reports and you are just slapping bar charts onto the page, and your visuals are not properly aligned, they're just everywhere, and it looks like you took 30 or 40 minutes to build that Power BI report, that is, you have not really built a Power BI report. You have just demonstrated that you can build some very rudimentary data visuals. To me, a Power BI report is not a report until it effectively communicates something from that data or tells me something that I didn't know, and also has the right color choices and aesthetic elements that result in an attractive presentation that makes me as a stakeholder or a business user want to explore that report and really engage with it. It's a very common mistake, and it's an extremely, I would say, difficult thing to sort of master that only comes with, dozens and dozens and dozens of reports and practice and engaging with your stakeholders to pick apart what you're good at and what you're not good at when it comes to this. I want to emphasize that if you are someone who is building the sorts of poor reports that I just described, you're doing fine. That's where I started. But if you want to, really, find more opportunities in a business intelligence career, and if you want to lock down those interviews and get hired quickly, you're going to need to master the presentation and communication elements that come with data visualization, and not just visualizing data. Too many people focus on the visualizing data part and not the presentation of it. If you can master all four of the things that Andy Kirk mentioned in that description of data visualization, then you're going to be on the road to success, but not before. Another mistake that I see in tons of reports that are built by people that are newer to Power BI or just newer to data visualization and BI reporting in general is that they don't demonstrate curiosity beyond just very I would say basic sort of descriptive summary statistics. Building really impactful data tools and reports is not just about counting things and summing things and averaging things. It's also about, identifying patterns and trends in the data and, giving the user sort of the flexibility to manipulate data so that they can find the things that are really interesting to them. It's about bringing insights to the table and sort of helping your users make connections between different things that are happening in the data. If you're, telling your users that a number has a certain average or that sales were a certain total, provide them additional context to help them make sense of that number. If you if you're presenting information and you're telling your company or your stakeholders that sales were $100 million last year, but that's the only thing that you're telling them, that might sound fantastic. $100 million in sales sounds wonderful to me. I would personally be over the moon and would no longer be recording Sweatpants BI videos if my Udemy courses started making me $100 million a year. But if you're someone like Apple or Amazon or Google and your company is suddenly only making $100 million in a year, you're in huge trouble, because these are companies that need to be making billions of dollars a year to stay viable. So presenting that larger context and visualizing things like total sales over times and by different product groups. And and visualizing things like what the change over time was, or the change across different dimensions of data was, just helps your users understand, okay, sales were $100 million, and that's being driven by this one product group that saw sales radically increasing. However, two product groups that we thought were going to be top performers really underperformed relative to recent years or where we thought we would be. Context is everything in communicating information and building BI tools. So if all you're doing is just sort of building charts that summarize data, but don't, make me care about that data, or, tell me what I should take away or what I should investigate, then ultimately, you're just kind of leaving me to fend for myself. And you're really not answering probably the most important questions that I would have when I'm using your BI tool. Another thing that's important to keep in mind with building Power BI reports is that you want to invite play and interactivity in a lot of situations. Again, most of us are not building Power BI reports just to, print them as a PowerPoint deck and, share out papers with our data visuals to people in our company. Most of us are publishing these things to the web so that our users can click around and interact with those things like they would a normal website. And the more engaging and fun and interesting that we make these BI tools, the stronger the chances are that they're going to come back and continue using those tools in the future. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that above all other things, we're showing the data and we're giving them insights that they can use to improve some, area of the company that they're responsible for. But we also want to make sure that our tools are engaging and pleasing for them to interact with. And in order to get them interacting, we need to give them things that they can interact with. In Power BI specifically, this means, deploying things like buttons and bookmarks and slicers so that they can sort of find within the data the specific thing that they're looking for. I would also say that things like bookmarks are really useful for sort of helping us conserve space in our Power BI reports, because a very common mistake that I see people who are new to Power BI making is that they have the tendency to present way too many visuals or too many elements at the same time. As humans, we might think that we're smart, but our brains can only take so much, especially when we haven't had enough coffee or when it's, Thursday or Friday and we have a long work week behind us. So, one thing that we need to make sure that we're doing is, sort of distilling core aspects of our data, into chunks that we can sort of let our users walk through. So if you've never used Power BI bookmarks before, that's an extremely useful way for sort of walking our users through different aspects and stories of our Power BI reports, instead of just throwing everything at them at once and overwhelming them, and not giving them sort of a way to take a step back and digest all of those different data elements easily, one at a time. So, I use bookmarks in my reports all the time to sort of focus on one theme, from my data, and then let my users sort of walk through and click buttons to interact on different views. And all of that is just intended to sort of make my reports more dynamic, more carefully sort of manage the information and insights that I'm presenting at one time, and make sure that my users have a very pleasing experience with just using my reports. So make sure that your reports benefit from all of Power BI's rich interactivity features, instead of just building things that are one-dimensional and sort of static. Carrying that same thought forward, another very common, huge mistake that I see people making in their Power BI reports all the time is that their reports are just extremely cluttered. And there are all kinds of things that cause clutter. I don't want you to think that clutter is just a bunch of objects on the page. Things like data visuals, text boxes, images. Yes, that's absolutely part of it. But I want you to think of clutter instead as anything that is sort of non-essential to understanding the data, or things that add additional burden on our poor little human minds, that are going to keep you from interpreting information and data quickly. So, clutter in your Power BI reports can take the form of using way too much color. Maybe your user doesn't know what the most important things are to focus their attention on, because there's bright and vibrant colors everywhere and the presentation is just really overwhelming. Maybe your user is exhausted by the fact that you've used a bunch of little images and icons everywhere, or they're struggling to focus on the specific data visual that you're presenting because you have a really huge and distracting image behind that data visual that maybe makes some of the text difficult to read. Or maybe it obscures, part of the actual bar chart because the colors in your bars overlap or don't play well with the colors in the image behind you. That's a nightmarish scenario for me. That's an instant deal breaker for me looking at any Power BI report that I see. Folks, do not put noisy background images behind your data visuals. It never works. And the thing is it's also bad form for your background image. If you're going to put an image in the background of your report and then you have so many data visuals and text boxes over top of it that no one can tell what the image is, why is it there? Edit your reports, and if something doesn't spark joy, to quote Marie Kondo, get rid of it, people. Clutter and noise can also take the form of, just having way too much text. Or it can, sort of be something that is magnified by having all of your data visuals super close to each other. Or the, impression of clutter can be caused by not having proper alignment and spacing between your data visuals. One thing that's kind of a pet peeve for me is when there are, and I'll just use some notes here from my notepad to demonstrate. If you have two data visuals that are blocks, if they're not perfectly aligned like this, but maybe they look like this, it just looks sloppy, folks. Make sure that you're always using proper spacing and alignment between things, and don't make sure that they're not like just carelessly overlapped like that. It just makes you as a Power BI developer look a little bit less professional than someone else, because it looks like you didn't take the time to properly space and consider where everything would go. I want to emphasize that if you are thinking, well, Sean, those things just don't really matter. People can still read my visuals. They can still interpret them. you're still thinking in the context of just visualizing data and not presenting and communicating data. So I want to go back to the Andy Kirk quote and make that distinction that that if you are not thinking in terms of presentation and aesthetics and communication, you are still only doing half of what data visualization really is in the context of business intelligence. So do anything that you can to sort of reduce clutter, make your reports look cleaner, more polished. If you have way too many things happening at one time on your Power BI report page, there are all kinds of different tricks that you can use to reduce that clutter or reduce the impression of color, such as using bookmarks, creating sections in your report, moving less important or distracting data visuals to other pages in your report, and really just thinking more carefully about what in your report is more important or less important, and then putting the more important stuff first and the less important stuff maybe towards the back of your report. Or, and this might be a novel concept, if it's not important, maybe just eliminate it entirely. And the last thing that I'm going to remark on should be a total no-brainer, but of course you want to make sure that you're not misrepresenting the data. So one thing that I would always say to make sure you do before you're publishing your Power BI reports or including them in a portfolio is make sure that you have double-checked your calculations, make sure that you have picked the appropriate data visual for whatever you're trying to visualize. And at the end of the day, just make sure that you've double-checked, even triple checked everything that you're presenting in your report. If you're putting something out there that I'm able to poke holes in, or if I'm finding errors within seconds of opening the report, or immediately, coming up with things that you should have thought of if you had just spent a little bit more time building that report and making sure that it was ready for publication, then chances are that I'm going to move on to the next candidate if you're someone that I'm considering, or if you've included a portfolio with your resume. Trust me, people make mistakes all the time. I've been doing this for a long time. I make mistakes. I find issues with my calculations, even after double checking, triple checking, doing peer review. Accidents happen, mistakes happen. Sometimes a definition of a measure changes or gets more nuanced with additional time or changes in your company. I want to emphasize that mistakes are totally normal and just a part of working with data and data visualization. What I'm talking about is doing things that are careless or just demonstrate sort of a lack of attention and studiousness in sort of presenting your data. That's a little bit easier to fix early on. Getting more technical and nuanced and mature with how you represent data, that just comes with more practice. So there you have it. Those are 8 big Power BI mistakes that I see every single day, mostly thanks to LinkedIn. And I get questions from people all the time on LinkedIn, asking me to critique or provide feedback on their work. I thought that it might be more helpful and more economical to just outline, because a lot of the new Power BI reports that I see, they have the same mistakes. So I thought it might be just easier for everyone if I just shared out the most common things that I look for in Power BI reports from people that are newer to Power BI and sort of highlight those for your benefit. So if you're someone who is, building their 3rd or 4th Power BI tool and just looking for a little bit of feedback, a lot of the things that I mentioned might be things that you are doing today and things that you need to work on your path to becoming a better Power BI developer and a better data visualization professional. So I've been Sean. This is Sweatpants BI. If you enjoyed this content, as always, feel free to give me a like or subscribe, or tell other people about these videos. Share it on LinkedIn. I don't care. I ultimately just want all of these videos to help as many people as possible. In the meantime, I will see you next time here on Sweatpants BI. Thanks, everybody.